Hello, hello! I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in a Running to Write, where I give questionable writing advice through running metaphors. Before I start, I want to give two shoutouts. First of all, thank you to Books by Adrian for creating this Stop the Spread t-shirt. It's all about not using spreadsheets when you're outlining or writing your novel, to which I'm a traitor to the cause, as I strongly track all of my metrics, from word counts to the rotating narrators to the days within the book that are taking place. So I do use spreadsheets, and I know this is going to break Adrian's heart, but I do use spreadsheets, but I also really like the shirt, so I kind of support his channel at the same time. I think it's a cool design. He's got a lot of other things on there, so check out the Books by Adrian channel, and if you're interested, check out his merch. I was on his live stream last Sunday, so it was a lot of fun, and you can get some idea as to the inner workings of my mind and my process, along with the other authors he regularly interviews, so check out his live stream. Second of all, I've changed my YouTube channel to officially be at youtube.com/runningtowrite, and I can only do that thanks to all of your support and help every week. So thank you for watching my videos, for subscribing, for liking, for commenting, for making this into a community of like-minded writers, authors, readers, whomever out there is watching this. Thank you. I'm working overtime this week and next, so I have less free time to record and edit than I would like. That means this episode will be a little rough around the edges and slightly below my usual quality of uploads. It's also going to be on a topic which I can do very quickly, which happens to be a bookshelf tour. These are the most meaningful book treasures that I've kept with me, and you can see every week behind me. I've moved around quite a bit and have had to drastically downsize my collection of novels. These are the books I've decided and chosen to keep with me, or have salvaged from my parents' house before they too moved. These books are the most meaningful to me, likely because they were the ones that I read at a young age when I was shaping into the reader and writer that I will one day become. I don't have enough time to go through each of these books, so I'm going to try and do justice to the best of the best and explain why they mean so much to me. Starting with one of the earlier books, we have The Lost Years of Merlin by T.A. Barron. This is the first in a series of 5, and my grandmother got it for me as a present. There's a lovely note on the first page from when she got it for me, and on the next page is the author's signature, which is pretty cool too. The series follows Merlin's young adult life as he washes ashore on the magical land of Fincaria, which is halfway between the living world and the afterlife. This shows him learning to tame his magic, and every moment is laden with the dread of the future and his burdens of destiny. My grandmother knew that I loved to read, she knew that I loved fantasy stories, and she helped really foster that love into the reader and writer that I've grown into today. For those of you who keenly look at the bookshelf behind me, you'll see that the series that I have for The Lost Years of Merlin is slightly out of order, in that I have the first 3 books on my bookshelf in hardcover, and then 2 paperbacks next to it. However, the hardcover books that I have are books 1, 2, and 4, whereas I only have the paperback copies for 3 and 5. And you'll see that the hardcovers are 3 hardcovers in a row, and then books 3 and 5 in paperback are right next to them. I just figured that looks a little bit better for my library visually, even though they are slightly out of order. Just a fun little fact about how I organize my system. Shifting to a similar 5-book series, also influenced by Celtic myths, we have The Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander. This is the first book, being the book of 3. This follows an assistant pigkeeper as he seeks out adventure, and along the way he meets a magical princess, a bard who, when he tells a lie, his harp strings break. When he stretches the truth, the harp strings break. And a cowardly creature who has a strong and committed heart. You can see at the bottom of this book, the cover is a little bit frayed. I was running when I was carrying this and I tripped and fell. So I scraped at my palm, I scraped at the bottom of the book, but the pages themselves are fine. So I kept this copy of the book, and I read through it pretty regularly as a young teen, but I haven't gone back, so I should go through and read it again. This is a classic story, and it shaped a lot of the tropes for future fantasy stories as it came out in, I want to say, the 60s. Unfortunately, the same isn't true for the finale of the series, as I lost that copy of the book and had to replace it with a hardcover. This is quite a beautiful hardcover, but it does make it a little odd when I go from paperback to hardcover with yet another series. In a lot of ways, those two series were my gateway into the world of fantasy, and they instilled such a sense of wonder for what a story could contain within it in my young child mind. Skipping forward a few years, we have The Physics of Superheroes. As a classically trained engineer, this was a fun book to read for me. I borrowed my one exception rule from it. Specifically, this book goes into how Cyclops from the X-Men breaks that rule. He fires optic blasts from his neck, which vary, but tend to be a force, like a concussive blast. By firing at cars or asteroids, he's moved them aside to protect people. That's fine. The problem is that the forces acting on his body would be equal and opposite. So his neck and boots would need to absorb that force and the friction that would be generated so that he doesn't move after moving such heavy objects aside. This book has helped me craft a magic system which can be based on the real world and holds up to the laws of physics once you get around that one exception rule. I found that when books go beyond that, then they tend to be less interesting, as all sense of dramatic weight gets thrown out the window, as anything can happen and magic can ultimately solve any problem. Next up, we have my Redwall novels by Brian Jacques. This is about a group of anthropomorphic woodland creatures as they defend mostly Redwall Abbey and the surrounding area. It's exceptionally British, and you can feel like some of the creatures and characters were plucked right out of different locations across the UK. Unfortunately, this is only about a third of my original series, as again, I've only been able to keep the books which I felt were the best, the books that in the series that I liked the most. The ones that I decided to keep were, in my opinion, the best adventure and best written, along with the original one of where it all started. Mariel of Redwall and The Bellmaker are my favorite books across the series for the high adventure and emotional trip that they take us on. Even knowing where they go, it still hits me when I read it. Let's see, where can I go next? I have always praised Raymond Feist's Machemia series and J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. You'll see them right behind my head. They have the prime real estate and take up almost an entire row all to themselves. That's how important those series are to me. Even before the movies were announced, I read The Lord of the Rings every summer. I know the series isn't for everyone, but it inspired such a sense of wonder in me and showed me what a story could truly be. When I decided that I wanted to write, one of the first books that I picked up was a biography about J.R.R. Tolkien. I know it's not exactly his words, but I wanted to absorb as much information about him as I could. Also, some of my family went on a trip to New Zealand, so they got these really cool things. It's about the Hobbiton movie set, and it's the actual locations of where they filmed everything. So some nice little additions to my library and my love of The Lord of the Rings. I also have Dinosaur Planet by Stephen Lee. This is a Ray Bradbury Presents novel, and it takes his short story, A Sound of Thunder, and runs with it. In fact, I think the first chapter is even just A Sound of Thunder copied and pasted. In it, a hunting agency of the future sends people into the past to kill big game like dinosaurs. And they get around the time paradoxes by killing these animals the moment before they would naturally have died. So, for example, a T-Rex might get crushed by a falling tree, so they can shoot it and kill it moments before that happens, and then just retrieve the bullets, and the world is no different. Unfortunately, everything goes wrong when one of the hunters gets scared and runs off the path, and when he goes back to the present, he finds out that he stepped on a butterfly. And so there's this massive butterfly effect resulting in time collapsing on itself and dinosaurs living alongside humans now as they've sort of evolved together and become more human-like. There's actually a picture here, so you can see this dinosaur has armor and a mace, and it's alongside one of the teenage heroes who are trying to fix the mistake of that coward hunter and resolve time itself. Now, this is only the first book in the series. I've lost the others in one of the various moves, and I never actually finished reading it, so this is one that I do want to go back and understand what happens in the story. I read this as middle grade, but I think it's a little bit closer to young adults. It was a good read back then. I really liked it as a kid. I haven't read it since, but I've kept it along with me the entire time. It's really good, kind of sci-fi in the modern age, so it's a cross between a lot of sci-fi tropes and genres, as it tells a really interesting story of time traveling teenagers. I see a common trend here in what I like. As far as my classics go, this is another middle grade series called Diadem by John Peel. John Peel did go back and write an additional 3 or 4 several years later. However, as those are each cliffhangers and lead to the next story, which was never resolved, I choose to think of this as a complete set. It's all about 3 wizards as they travel across dimensions to try and fix the problems that their predecessors caused. It's a great middle grade series, and there's a lot of fun puzzles in there, even though they are very simple, even for middle grade. It's a lovely fantasy adventure, and one kids nowadays might still like. I don't know how dated it is, but it resonated with me and my friends, and I had a lot of fun reading it. Here's my favorite Michael Crichton story called Timeline. You'll see that the book is a little bit damaged. There's a lot of cuts and folds, and the back is split. This has been through quite a few moves with me, but this is my favorite Michael Crichton story. It's about a group of archaeologists who end up traveling back in time to 1700s France and use their present day knowledge and their understanding of what's going to happen to try and survive, really. And as I mentioned before, you'll see that there is a very common trend between time travel and portal fantasies across my entire library and across the books that I really enjoy reading. But what can I say? I'm a product of 90s marketing. I've mentioned countless times how much I love the Star Wars series, and right here we have Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Force trilogy and Kevin J. Anderson's Jedi Academy trilogy. In my opinion, these are the best stories in the extended universe, although unfortunately they are no longer considered to be canon. They deal with the post-Return of the Jedi era and deal with Han and Leia and Luke managing the remnants of the Republic as they try and defend against what remains of the evil empire. Galactic Empire, I guess, technically, depending on how you fall in there. And then the Jedi Search follows up with Luke trying to start his own Jedi Academy. And it leads directly into the Young Jedi Knights, which was my favorite middle grade series as a kid. Unfortunately, I no longer have any of those physical books, as they either fell victim to mold in my parents' basement, or they were lost in one of my various moves. They are at the top of my list to get in ebook form so I can try and relive some of that nostalgia from when I was a kid. To close out my bottom shelf, we have The Legend of Zelda Encyclopedia. It's shaped like the original cartridge and even comes in a Nintendo sleeve. It is beautiful and shows off the plot of every Zelda video game, along with the design art and comments from the creators and what the various items mean. There's a lot of hidden meaning included in there, and this has been an incredible read for a fan. As far as books are concerned, I've shifted up to my top shelf where you can see clearly what you usually only catch glimpses of. These are the trade paperbacks that my wife and I have collected over the years, including DC, Marvel, and indie comics. You can see her quintessential Batman collection over here, where you have this lovely Frank Miller leather-bound copy, including The Dark Knight Returns, Batman Year One, and Wanted Santa Claus Dead or Alive, which is a collection of 3 different Batman stories in this beautiful leather-bound novel. I'm not going to pull it out now because that would probably move too much, but trust me on this one, it is lovely and tells some 3 classic Batman stories. There's also The Killing Joke, and you can see over here we're shifting down to her Green Lantern collection. We have Blackest Night, Brightest Day, all great stories. Moving down, we have The Sandman. We have the complete works of Frank Miller as he wrote Spider-Man, and we have the first compiled issues of the original X-Men series. That's where it all started from for me, and they are dated. They are from the 60s, but they are monumental for how much those stories impacted me. In the middle is the 6-book series called Lock and Key. It's about a family in Massachusetts house who are the caretakers for magical keys. They can do things such as teleport to any known door, control shadows, or open up a person's mind to plant or remove memories. There are 2 seasons on Netflix based on the show, which do not do the source material justice. This is dark and extremely graphic, so be warned. There are a lot of trigger warnings for the series, including assault and dismemberment by demon. The series was written by Joe Hill, which is a pen name for Stephen King's son. As a child, Joe Hill also acted in a George Romero horror, so not surprisingly, he fits right at home with the horror elements in Lock and Key. Nestled within our collection, we have 2 prize comics. First up, we have the wedding between Mary Jane and Peter Parker. My wife got this for me because she knows how much I love Spider-Man. There we go. And then we have a comic that I got for her, which is Birds of Prey, and it conveys, or it tells the story of a date between Nightwing and Oracle. There are a lot of other pieces of sentimental value, including gifts from a friend's wedding. I don't want to go too far into those, so I'm going to end with the 2 large pieces of art right on my shelf. On one side of the bookshelf is art based on the character models for the team members of Chrono Trigger. Although they are 2D, this art gives them depth by adding shadows to make them pop a little more. Not surprisingly, there is Chrono Trigger art throughout my home. If I pan the camera over a little, there's a wooden clock which I don't use when I'm recording because it can be loud. This is based on the logo of the game. Finally, we have the bookend created by the incredibly talented Mr. Vlandus, which was the incentive that made me decide to create this video and showcase my bookshelf. I'm currently reading his novel, Ivar, Blood and Steel, which I placed back in the nook so there isn't a hole while I'm filming. This scene and the portal in the back are based on his fantasy world. His dedication and craftsmanship come through clearly in every tree, and I can't thank Mr. Vlandus enough for sending this to me. Here it is with the lights on. Now, based on the camera angle that I'm currently shooting with, you can't see the skeleton leaning behind the tree just outside the portal. With the lights off, you can see the portal illuminate the fantasy scene. This makes the piece look even better, and I'm sorry that my camera is not giving it the full effect this deserves. I'm including a link where Mr. Vlandus goes into the making of this beautiful bookend. There you have it. Those are some of the books that mean everything to me. They instilled a love of reading, which has only grown. I do tend to prefer more diverse stories now, as there were certain trends, tropes, and characteristics which were common across these stories. Reading about characters who were similar to me pulled me deeper into their worlds and created my passion for reading. I want everyone to have that experience. Anyone and everyone should be able to walk into a bookstore or find online a book which calls out to them with characters who reflect their worldview, experiences, and struggles. Diverse stories and authors give us better novels to read and a wealth of new stories to tell. We should all be championing for diverse viewpoints and tales. I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write. If you enjoyed this look into my lair, then please press those like and subscribe buttons. Let me know in those comments what books you've kept after all these years. Do you agree with my opinions, or is everything I said wrong? I post my running and writing progress on Instagram and Twitter as Running to Write, so be sure to follow me and join in with your own thoughts. See you next time. Until then, treasure your favorites. You never know when they might get misplaced.